I believe that we all need support in living out our fullest lives. Throughout the past 2 years, I've highlighted the work of spectacular healers and intuitives who are in service to supporting us on our journey back to self. Today, you're going to meet Janet Rae Orth, an intuitive life coach and clairvoyant with over 28 years of experience. She's here with us today to offer ways in which you can connect with your innermost being and knowing, and her many mystical understandings, which I can't wait to get into. Join us in this truly magical conversation as we dive into the life of an internationally known intuitive and clairvoyant. Hi, Janet, and welcome back to Mystical Sisterhood, everyone. I'm here with Janet Rae Orth, and I'm so excited because recently I interviewed Leah Bolin, who is a dream work specialist. And I turned around, and I don't always do this, but I asked Leah, is there anyone in your world who might be a great fit for the show? And she immediately offered up your name, Janet, and I immediately made contact with you. So welcome to the space. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. Leah's awesome too. Yeah, she's fun to work with.
Oh, she's so good. I love it. I love just the general air. I feel like most healers and intuitives I meet are very light spirits.
Hmm.
And even sometimes even a lighter voice or a quality like that. But I love it because it's usually very playful and just a fun
Hmm.
space to be in. So so the listener gets to know you just a little bit more. I just wanted to read a little bit of your bio, but you are an internationally known intuitive consultant with over 28 years of experience in guiding individuals towards their true path. With a deep seated intuitive gift and unwavering commitment to personal growth, you have become a trusted leader in the realm of spiritual counseling, and you've worked with many prominent celebrities, Fortune 500 CEOs, and business leaders, distinguished authors and speakers, medical professionals, and a range of diverse individuals. Drawing from your extensive experience, you have lectured and offered meditation sessions with invaluable insights and just these kind of experiences that are transformative for the people who come to you. And so currently we can find you working at Miraval in Tucson, Arizona. And you just told me that before that you spent many years at Canyon Ranch. So that's a little bit of your sort of bio, but we're here to
Right.
kind of dig in and just get the sense and essence of your life. But welcome. And is there a particular place that just was sharing that you would like to begin?
One of the things that I also do that's been really popular lately, because we have so much more need for it, is I teach a class on psychic protection. We're all so sensitive and we're all plugged in all the time. Like even when we go on vacation, we have our phones with us. So there isn't really a space anymore where people can really get away and decompress. And over the years that I've been doing what I do, I did the math one time. I'm an ex-accountant before I did this. And I read over 800 people, new people a year. And that doesn't count the people that repeat with me. So in other words, I do a lot of readings. I get to see a lot of patterns. In the beginning, when I started doing what I do, maybe once or twice a year, somebody would ask me about anxiety for themselves or a family member. Now it's almost daily.
Wow.
Yeah, the rates of anxiety, and not just anxiety, oh, I'm shy or don't want to talk to strangers, but people are having deep seated issues with anxiety and discomfort and taking risks and leaving the house. And we sort of got comfortable being at home a little bit during COVID. Now we have to come back out. This class has been very helpful for people because it gives them some boundaries energetically so we can be around others, because sensitive people, we do feel what other people are thinking,
Mm,
judging,
mm.
expecting, and sometimes we want to perform to it and it becomes overwhelming.
Wow. Thank you for starting there. I had read one of your blog pieces on the psychic
Mhm.
protection, and I had planned to ask you about it. So when you think about, I feel like just you describing like over time, it used to
Mhm.
be very seldom that someone would come in with anxiety, and now it's just blown up and the amount
Mhm.
that you're hearing about it. So that tells me that something is happening out there, just the amalgamation of sort of experiences and energy that's out there creating this. How do you understand it now? Is that how you understand it? Is almost like just a buildup of experiences and yeah.
I don't think it's one thing, obviously, right? I think it's sort of a perfect storm of many things.
Mm,
For example, when I grew up, I mean, I saw something funny on Facebook the other day about Gen something or other. I get all the generations mixed up, but how we basically drank water out of a hose and our parents said goodbye in the morning and see you at night. And that was it. And we were on our own. It's an exaggeration. But at the same time, we really were outside all the time when we weren't in school. I even grew up in Minnesota where it's cold and we were still outside all the time. So that's nature. That's the earth is very grounding. You know, we walked barefoot. Now, if I even see somebody going barefoot, even me, I'm like, ooh, right? We just don't do that kind of stuff anymore. But yet, grounding to the earth is very important, right? So we don't have nature, we don't have grounding, we don't have fresh air. Fresh air is so important. We don't even air out our houses like we used to. And then the rubber shoes that people wear, I mean, I do think there's an impact there, but I also think there's a direct correlation to living indoors and being online. It's just huge. My daughter's childhood is so different than my childhood. And even though I think she's had a fabulous childhood, and I think I did, I literally was outside all the time. And she was outside in elementary school, but it's progressively after that, kids aren't outside unless they're in sports.
Thank you for sharing that. It's such a revelation that hasn't been shared on the podcast before. And that's the funny thing is that when it comes to, I think for a while I thought you don't want to overschedule your children for sure. But then you look at it a different way and you're like, wow, these days it's an opportunity to run and be in movement and play. And, it's all the intention behind it. But I really appreciate that. And it makes me think of when I was young, and I've thought this with my kids. They're older now, like 3 of them in the 20 age range. But the amount of times that I stubbed my toe as a kid, and you stub your toe and how painful that was. And you would go inside and you'd get the Band-Aids for it and everything. And I don't know that my kids ever stubbed their toes. And that was even 15, 20 years ago when they were.
But here's the difference. If they
Yeah.
stub their toes, they'd probably come in and ask you to get them a Band-Aid. Whereas you and I went and got our own Band-Aids too. And I'm not really suggesting that talking about independence, and that's definitely a factor there too.
Yeah.
But it's really just that children are just less resourceful. We're all less resourceful and so plugged in.
So right there, thank you for just beginning with this point, because right there is a call to bring our lives outside. Even for me sitting here with you, I've been on the computer several hours today, but I've got a choice after this to go to, it's 9/11 as we're recording there's a beautiful lemonade stand it's a charitable event, and it's beautiful. And I'm in Chicago and it's sunny here today. Maureen, Janet just gave you the invitation to go.
I have a huge patio outside and I consider it part of our living space. I am literally out there all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not all day, every day. Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that lack of grounding is really showing up in people's
the lack of grounding, the lack of fresh air. But again, even just sitting in my backyard, there's nature, birds, hawks, like you learn from animals. They're great teachers. But even just the moment to pause and observe a bird going by, flying beautifully in the sky or something like that, like we're missing moments like that. And those are moments that slow us down. We were a lot slower in the past. We're so fast now.
Yeah. It seems so obvious. And I know that in these classes that it's really impactful I think it is right here in this conversation. So when you're talking about, then you called it psychic protection?
Protection is the class that I teach at Miraval. And I also incorporate it into the beginning of my manifesting workshops that I do all over the country. Those are on my website.
Okay. And so are there some simple takeaways that we can practice as well to the listener for today?
So would you like to do a moment?
Of course. Yeah, that sounds great.
So go ahead and close your eyes for a moment. And I just want you to feel your body, first of all. Just feel it in this moment. No judgment about anything, but just feel it. Are you hungry, tired? Is your breath, oftentimes our breath is restricted. It's almost like our belt's too tight. We don't even realize it, but I don't want you to change it if you notice that in this moment. I just want you to feel it. And the listeners can do this too. And then I want you to notice your emotional body and maybe just take a moment, put some words to what your emotions may be: happy, sad, confused, distracted. Again, no judgment on anything. I just want awareness for this moment. And then lastly, just notice your thoughts. Where is your mind? Is it in this moment? Is it thinking about things we've said, you've done, you're going to do, any of the above? Again, no judgment, but just be aware. And then right at the edge of your aura, I'd like you to imagine a nice big red rose and just sort of smell it, admire it, get a sense of how open or closed it is. And then let the stem of that rose go right along the edge of your aura, right down to the floor. And you don't have to know where your aura is. Your spirit knows. And then it can go through the floor and all the way down to the center of the planet and have roots. So it's firmly anchored there. And then I want you to create an intention that this rose is going to protect you, that any energy that's outside of your space that isn't you isn't coming in. It's just going to hit the stem of the rose, go down to the center of the planet and be recycled, or it's going to bounce back to wherever it came from. And then I want you to notice your body again and see if something changed. Maybe your breath is a little deeper, a little softer. Maybe shoulders are relaxed. Then also notice your emotional body. Maybe it's a little calmer, a little quieter, a little more still, a little easier just to be in present time. And then lastly, I want you to notice your thoughts. Again, maybe it's quieter, a little easier just to be. Because all of that energy of even thinking, being distracted with our thoughts, that is just energy that's coming at you. That part of you is wanting to process or deal with or catalog. Did you notice a difference?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I saw the beauty of the rose, and I noticed in my body, I'm pretty present here in the moment for you, but prior to you doing that, I was thinking probably of several things anyway.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then I noticed, yeah, that you said the ease of your shoulders and
Right.
definitely the ease of my breath and the
Isn't
beauty.
that profound?
Yeah, I feel like even you suggesting, and I'm no aura specialist. I want to talk about that at some point today too. But I love that you don't need to know where it
Yeah.
starts, stops,
Yeah.
finish.
Yeah.
Your spirit knows. Thank you for
Yeah.
lending
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Part about your breath changing, that's profound. Because I want
Hmm.
you to think for a moment of if somebody snuck up to scare you, we tighten up and we hold our breath. And we are
Hmm.
doing micro versions of that all day long, just anticipating what's next, where do I have to go, what's this person going to say. We do this all the time.
Hmm.
So we don't realize how restricted our breath is, right? And then when you have that rose there to handle whatever energy may come, your breath just naturally does what it's supposed to do. And
Hmm.
it can be profound, a profound difference.
Lovely.
That alone, we have a
Yeah.
lot more energy if we start breathing.
Okay. Yes. It infuses all your cells. And so I'm
Yeah.
thinking about a person who does either have a lot of anxiety or there's someone in their family who does. Okay. There's a couple tools that you've already given us. And then are there real life lifestyle changes too? Because, like you said in the beginning, we are bombarded
Okay.
with the
Right.
energy and yeah.
So there's a lot of there's multi layers because most often those of us who suffer from anxiety are sensitive.
Okay.
So we're not just sensitive to energy, but we can be sensitive to environmental things. We're sensitive to what we eat, and all of that has an impact. So, we want to address, are we eating properly? Are we getting the nutrients? Do all those blood tests, check your vitamin D, check, etc. Address all of that. Magnesium is essential. Hydration is so important. You'd be surprised how often the first time somebody sits down in front of me for a reading, I say, wow, you're really dehydrated. A lot of us don't realize how much water we really need.
Mhm.
So sleep, all of those real life things are
Yeah.
important to address. And what's really interesting is because we live such a fast-paced life, how the more anxious we get, the less we address all of that because we're so busy taking care of other things,
Mhm.
right? And then of course, exercise, fresh air. So many cultures believe that the first thing you should do in the morning is get some sunshine. And I believe this too. I think it has a profound effect. Get that fresh air, reset your body with sun. Sun is so important. Without
Yeah.
sunscreen, you don't have to be out there all day, a few
Mhm.
minutes, etc. Hats are helpful, things like that. But then more importantly, I really think it's how we think and how we frame things in our life. I think gratitude is critical, but I think in everyday things, no matter what's going on, you can look at it in a negative way or you can look at it in a positive way. And I don't mean rose-colored glasses,
Yeah.
pretending there's not a problem where there is a problem, but we can frame things in a way that still remains positive. And that's one of, when I coach people, that's something that I work on a lot is just breaking it down to reframe how we think. And especially like with the internet, I've seen this a lot with my daughter. Maybe you see this with your kids because they're around that age where they've really grown up a lot with social media. People are almost being trained to think in a negative way rather than to think there's a silver lining or things can work out okay or this disappointment is just temporary, something better is coming. Like people are sort of trained almost now to just think negatively and they don't even realize it.
Mm-hmm. So
So
it's
checking in with the way that we think, journal writing can be very important for that because sometimes it helps us get a little more clear on what we're thinking.
beautiful. Yeah. Okay. So that's definitely, a great technique. I'm wondering too, because I said at the top of the hour that you have worked in two amazing, I've only been to Miraval, but two amazing places that it's almost like the whole picture of a human being, of a spiritual being.
Yes,
So
yes.
has that informed how you have brought those principles into your work in terms of the fullness of all the things that are important for us, like that you've named sleep and nutrition and just working in an environment that supports all parts of our system.
I think I was aware of that stuff before I started working in either one of these places because I've been on a journey with this kind of stuff for such a long time. And when I was little, I really related to that story, The Princess and the Pea, a lot. You know, I mean, I was really aware that if a little thing goes out of balance, for me, it's a big thing. Like if I don't get enough sleep or whatever. So I was already doing a lot of my own sort of self-awareness and that journey. But it definitely helps to be an environment, work environment that supports those
Mhm.
ways of thinking
Mhm.
and being, of course. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're inspiring places to visit because the other one that I've been to is Omega Institute in New York State. And that's an old boys camp, but they have where they serve their food. It's almost like an old mess hall, like almost a
Hmm.
really big cabin that you'd have at camp when you're little. But you go in and all the food is so plentiful and beautiful and colorful. And I just remember, I think at Miraval too is just you're just nourishing yourself. You're so aware of it. And so the task then is for any of this is how can I replicate it and how can I take that back into my everyday life at home?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because we want to eat healthy. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what nourishes our body, right? It's so
Hmm.
critical.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that through even before the advent of social media with modern marketing and everything, that we are being our eye has trained away. And when did we lose healthy eating? It's when all the products came onto the market.
It's a very American phenomenon, honestly.
Mhm,
Even the public lunches in France are so much better than they were. They wouldn't eat what we eat. They
mhm,
outlawed food coloring in the 70s in Europe. You know, we still allow it here.
mhm.
There's so many things like that. But that gets into big pharma and
Yeah.
corporations and lobbyists and things of that nature.
I think too, though, it's the conversation is so relevant because what I hear you saying and what I believe too is that we're bringing the empowerment back to ourselves and bringing back how do I want to feel? And I deserve to feel calm and anxiety free and nourished and all these different things. So I appreciate the conversation because I think it's a right now out there where we're learning this and we're teaching it as a collective too, which I love.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Right, exactly. And we've lost a lot of information that used to get passed down. Opening a window used to just be common sense. Now our houses are so energy efficient
Yeah.
that CO2 levels are getting really high in homes and things like that. And people don't open windows and don't air out their house and don't even think about that anymore because we just don't have traditions of carrying on and doing things consistently like
Yeah.
previous generations did.
That's such a good point. It's so funny because these days we talk about ancestral lineage a lot is like, oh, the things, the baggage that's passed.
Right.
However, what I hear you saying is there was the wisdom too, the
There was a
wisdom
lot
that
of
came
wisdom
down. Yeah.
because people were slow enough
Hmm.
that they could observe in life what actually affected people. Again, when I grew up in northern Minnesota in the wintertime, my grandmother always had a bedroom window open, a kitchen window open a crack, even in the winter.
Uh-huh.
Right. But that was wisdom. That was common sense that was passed down because they recognized what would happen if a house became too closed in, if there wasn't fresh air. Like simple things like that, like even old wives' tales talking to plants. We now have science that there's actually
Yes.
plants grow and respond when they are spoken to.
Yes.
But people would recognize that in the past because they observed it. We're so busy, we don't observe things anymore, collectively or individually, as much as we used to.
Yeah. It's such a call to slow down. It's making me laugh too because in the morning when I get up early and I have some quiet time, so I'm in Chicago, but it's hot in the summer, but I will see what happens to me when fall and winter comes, but I love to open that front window. We have a couch that the back is against the window and I'll open it because I like to hear the sounds of the birds or I like
Isn't
to
it?
hear like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
breeze or whatever. So it's
Yeah.
reminding me like, oh, Maureen, maybe that's not, there's a
That's a good
reason. Like
thing.
there's an
Yeah.
ancestral wisdom almost like coming through. So thank you for
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right.
So then I was also because in on Mystical Sisterhood we've had mediums and intuitives like just a few before my a friend of mine Valerie and another woman. And so I'm curious about because I love how we're talking about you brought up grounding. That's that principle, the psychic protection, even gratitude because I was looking through like, oh, when I was studying to get ready for today and looking at your blogs, oh, what is Janet's blend of work that she does? And so let's just say a few more words about gratitude and the practice of gratitude and what that looks like and feels like and why that's so important.
Because there are so many things that happen in a day, big or small, that what especially like we write in a gratitude journal, right? The practice of stopping and pausing and thinking, What can I be grateful for today? And it's hard to do this. If you're going to really sit down and try to come up with 3 new things every single day, the first week, you're going to fly through. Oh, I've got the best husband, the best dog, the best whatever, right? Best friend. We can, but then when you have to start to really go beyond sort of that, we don't want to repeat, then you have to really look. Right. And there are things there.
Yeah.
There are things that you wouldn't register, things that even on a bad day are good that you might not notice. A kindness somebody said, a special gesture, a thoughtfulness, a gift,
Yes.
who knows, even your intuition telling you something, but we don't pause. And so we miss them. And so again, we stay stuck in the negative of what's happening in the bad day or whatever. Whereas if you recognize the positive, it carries you up. It lifts you up, right? It's very restorative.
Yeah. Okay, that's so good because my daughter was doing a gratitude journal for a while, got away from it, and we were just talking about bringing it back. And then that talk about just the chain and the inner web of everything that's happening, because then that conversation brought to mind gratitude for me. And I was at a garden center with my girlfriend last Friday afternoon, and we were walking through to see if they had fall mums. And then I said to her, okay, I was trying to pick a number that was reasonable. And I said, 6 or 7 gratitudes. And we went back and forth. And I remember, I'm going to share this one too. Years ago, my mom died in 2016, but I remember a year or two later with my oldest sister doing like, because sometimes moms can get a bad rap, right? But I said, let's talk about gratitude and what mom did really well, or what you're grateful for. And it was really fun because it was just like a riff of this and this. And I can see what you're saying about that energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it can be really simple things, but they're special, right? And they have meaning and they do lift us up. And it does remind us that life is good and good things are happening. And, Stanford did a long-term study on happiness. And that was one of the things. They put everybody in there, people with chronic pain, people with money, poor people, whomever, and educated people, just everybody. And in the end, really what they came to was that people who are grateful are happy. Bottom line.
Ooh, that's powerful.
It's very powerful. It makes all the difference, right? Like, in other words, like, you can have a lot, you can be a lot, you can do a lot, but that doesn't guarantee that you're going to be happy. It's really, again, like how you think and how you feel. And we can control how we think and how we feel. A lot of us think we can't control our feelings, that feelings just happen to us. Really, they can be disciplined. Look at athletes. If you watch any sport, if an athlete's not in the right space emotionally, they're off their game. But if they pause and they reset what they think and what they feel about the game or the call or the whatever, they're winning again, right? Yes. If they can control their emotions, right? If they can shift them, we can too.
I love that. You're giving so many practices today. You know what? I'm thinking about how individuals can also, when you bring up the sports example, be really hard on themselves.
Yes.
And if we have those, because I sometimes feel that even in myself in a day, I can be in that feeling of abundance from whatever, a few hours in the morning, and then something shifts, and then I am not so much in that. And what do you say in those times? Or sometimes I think it's like, Maureen, that's just a signal to go rest. Like maybe you need to sort of replenish, but also those parts that we can be hard on ourselves and the not enoughness and the
right. You're really touching on something again that's really big, because I also think it goes to our levels of anxiety going up so much, is that everything is so much more complicated and it's harder to achieve. It's harder to buy a house. It's harder to get into college. My daughter just got into college. She's 19. She took a gap year. And when she was applying, my dad, her grandfather, was joking. He couldn't believe how complicated it was to apply for college now, right? You just went back then. And really, when I think about it too, I'm like, I don't really remember having a lot of fear or worry about whether I would get into college. It was like, if you were a good enough student, there wasn't a problem, right? Now, I wasn't trying to go to Harvard, you know what I'm saying? But still, it didn't see, nothing really seemed out of reach if you really put, now I've had people tell me their kids have 4.0 plus, they speak Mandarin, they've done everything in the world, they still can't get into the college they want to go to, right? Everything is harder. So we are all chasing things a lot. So the consequence of not getting it's plausible that we might not get everything we want, even though we try really hard, right? So we have to learn how to frame that again too, so that we don't feel failure, we still feel success, right? There has to be a way to look at it and still see, we're always at a different sort of level, right? Okay, at least I got here, right? I might go farther, but a lot of times we don't even stop and validate. This is big from where I started. You know what I'm saying? Wow, I should really validate. This is big. Even though maybe I want to go here, this is big. Like I
Yes.
climbed a lot of mountains to get here. We
Hmm.
don't pause. We don't celebrate it. We're just, so I encourage people a lot to pause, take that
Yeah.
moment, have your own little
Hmm.
celebration, have a glass of
Hmm.
wine, watch the
Hmm.
sunset. Doesn't have, you don't have to go to Miraval or take a big trip or
Right.
whatever. Just validate. I had a success. Like
Yep.
this is big, because then we feel calm again. And then we feel a
Mm.
sense of I can do it, right? Like I am succeeding rather than I'm failing.
Oh, absolutely. And you can see how that you've got that success, whatever it is, or that celebration or whatever but typically we'll bypass it and we'll just
That's what
get
I
to
mean.
the
We just want to
next.
jump to the next one,
Yeah.
and then we're not good enough because we're not
Hmm.
there yet, right? But
Hmm.
again, if you look at where
Yeah.
you came from and how hard it
Right.
was to get there, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I find it interesting, Janet, because you're an intuitive and you're a clairvoyant, but then it's interesting. A good friend of mine, Valerie, who has been on the podcast a couple times, I'm always stunned that, oh my gosh, like you receive messages and highly intuitive, and yet so much of this is so applicable because you think it's going to be like, oh, it's going to be so out there, but
So out
actually
there,
it's
right?
like no, no, and it is life coaching, and it is the ability to reframe and support people in their everyday lives, and that's kind of a
Yes.
ironic thing, right? We don't.
Yeah.
I love your messages and just the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that, yeah, people sometimes maybe who haven't been to a clairvoyant before walk away with so much information, number one, but then so like amazingly surprised about it all too.
Oh, always. And even sometimes that I look normal. you know,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stereotypes.
Absolutely. I like to backtrack sometimes too. I like what you're saying about the sensitivity and empathic nature of people, and that we want to really honor that and know that about ourselves, and that it's not a weakness, right?
Mm-mm.
There's somewhere
Right. It's
along
a
the line.
strength.
Yes, yes.
Right,
It's a
because
strength.
it's an inner guidance system, like there's a thing that's been going around the internet recently, lucky girl syndrome, which I haven't really dived into it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what it is. I haven't followed specifically what this new thing is, but I remember even when I was 18, people used to say to me all the time, you're so lucky, because it seemed like every time I wanted something, the door was open,
Mhm.
whatever. And I would always look at myself and feel like I don't really feel like I'm that lucky, like it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like luck. But again, if you're following your inner guidance system, if you
Mhm.
are aligned with where you should be, what you should be doing, maybe should's the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
to get where you
Yeah.
want to be, right? If you're aligned with it, the doors are going to open.
Mm.
Like it's going to happen. You're going to have done all the prep work innately so that when you're there, you're ready and it happens. It
Mhm.
looks like luck because it seems effortless, but it's really just, let me just put this to you another way. I live in Tucson, a desert. We do have a monsoon, but this didn't happen to be during monsoon season. And I walked into the lobby of Miraval one day carrying an umbrella. And one of the people who worked there turned around and goes, "Oh, I guess you're expecting rain today." It
Yeah.
wasn't monsoon season and it did rain later, right? Like it just makes life easier if you're listening. And it's not like I had some big message. It was just like I grabbed the umbrella that day. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's really, it can be very simple,
It was helpful.
very helpful. It just makes life easier.
Wow, wow. Yeah, and I always how do you think about, I don't want to say delineate, but how do you think about this interplay of that inner wisdom and the inner voice, and then that guidance that comes from our spirit guides, angels? What is it? Is it all simultaneous?
It is actually. Like most of us know what our inner voice or intuition sounds like, even if we don't hear
Mhm.
it all the time. We just know, oh, don't trust that person, or don't be friends with them, or they're insincere or two faced. Or most of us just have feelings. And no, we do have some intuition, even if we wouldn't really define ourselves that way.
Yeah.
But so we know that voice. But a lot of times when messages come from spirit guides or
Mhm.
divine, God, whatever, they still come in that same voice. They don't really always sound different. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? It's not, hello, Janet. It's the same voice, right? So it really is important that we don't dismiss it, because my point is, it's not always loud. It doesn't always come banging, crashing. You have to be aware. You've got to be tuned in. It can be very subtle.
Yeah. And so when we start tuning in and receiving messages, I try to pay attention and maybe write it down, or just know that they're not by accident.
They're
They're
not.
on purpose and they're meaningful, and you don't have to act on each one,
Right.
but there's a possibility there. And
Yes.
is that our soul's guidance, and sort of just tapping into that reason why we're here, and the every single message that we receive either from inner or from our guides is here to get us back on track and our
Yeah.
own, or discernment.
Or just to make life easier, right?
Okay.
Or to make it more fun, or, it can open all kinds of doors for you, keep us safe,
Yes.
truly, honestly,
Yeah, and sometimes we do become our own worst enemy. When you were talking about expectations, I just ran across something and then wrote in my journal, what are your expectations? And the funny thing is, like, okay, let's just say we talk about money and the flow of financial, and money is energy and there's enough of it and all the things. And then I think it was surrounding that, it said, what are your expectations? And I can put, so let's just speak to this kind of thinking. I can say, like, oh, I expect this many clients. I expect this money to flow. I expect success in the groups I run, whatever it is. And then my then my thinking can go like off track later and I lose it. And I think, oh gosh, this isn't abundant. And we call that human nature, but is that really more conditioned
Okay,
human nature?
so when you say you can go off track, do you mean
Yeah.
like you get into doubts like, oh, this will never
Yes.
happen? Oh
Yes.
yeah, of course,
Absolutely.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
No, I call those doubts, that's just energy, right? That is an
Okay.
energy meant to stop you that you can. So for example, maybe sometimes people don't want us to grow. Maybe sometimes people don't want us to be successful. And they don't always mean that in a malicious, harmful way. Think about middle school when maybe the first person in your friendship group gets a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right? Everybody else can feel a little threatened. Ooh, are we going to lose our friend, right? So
Hmm.
what do? They start putting down the new boyfriend, right? So that the friend comes back to the circle. Now
Right.
they're doing that because they love you and they don't want to lose you, right? It's not necessarily malicious, even if it maybe is a little misdirected, right?
Mhm.
So energy can come at us all the time, right? We don't even have to
Yeah.
know where it's from. I don't want you to succeed, or don't have more than me, or so that energy appears as doubts. And this
Okay.
is another thing that I teach to keep out. This is why in the
Yes.
beginning of my manifesting workshop, I also still do the psychic protection,
Okay.
because we have to keep those doubts out. Because if we let them in, that's
Yes.
like the athlete who's not in the winning frame of mind, so to speak, right? And they
Mhm.
miss the shot that I could make. So we have to keep those doubts out. We have to really see them as foreign energy, lies,
Yeah.
whatever, and just release them, bounce
Yeah.
them back to wherever they came from. But if we believe them, that's
Yep.
when we're stalled.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so much misunderstanding about like the not knowing for most people that it could be other energies coming at us. And then that it leads us to believe that the problem is us all the time, which is,
Yeah,
and
right.
that's not
Well,
true.
that's human nature. We personalize things, right? We personalize things. We think everything's personal, but we have to learn to recognize. And this is why I think animals are better teachers, because animals recognize where things are coming from. They recognize competition, for example. The big buck with the big horns, the little buck with the little horns still goes after the big buck. When even as a kid, you look and you go, that buck, what are they doing? Right? They're not going to beat the big buck. But yet the competition tells them to try. But they don't take it personally. When people are competitive with us, when people we take it personally. We personalize everything. So we think we must have done something to them or made them act that way or feel that way or not, and that's another thing we have to really
Yeah.
release that energy of personalizing everything.
So good. So good. There's so many gems here. I want to ask you a couple more questions. Just as we talk about the change from, I think it's the Piscean age to the age of Aquarius,
Yeah.
why is that meaningful? And what do you know about that as a clairvoyant, or what are we meant to know?
What's interesting about this is if you look in history, the last times that we were in the age of Aquarius and how both transformative but also disruptive they were, which is very similar to where we are right now. Because the last time we basically had the American Revolution. So pre the American Revolution is when we started to go into the age of Aquarius. And that's when, if you were for the monarchy and your cousin was for the patriots becoming a new country, you couldn't tell each other the truth. You'd literally get hung, right? You could get
Mhm.
killed. Now we just get canceled. Right.
Right.
Right. You tell people and they get canceled one way or another. Right. But it's still the same kind of energy of where we don't feel safe because of our viewpoints. But again, what came out of that? A whole new country. Right. Also, at the same time, France was they had their own revolution. Let them eat cake. It was simultaneous. The time before that, Martin Luther left the Catholic Church and started the Lutheran Church. So
Mm,
again, Age of Aquarius is the time of profound changes. things end, new things start, but it can be a little disruptive as it's occurring, which is,
Okay.
we're seeing both of that. But again, there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful and optimistic because Aquarius is all about idealism. We have more Aquarian presidents than any other sign, and most of our founding fathers are Aquarius. That's why we have President's Day in February. And
Yeah.
so that's Aquarius. Think of, regardless of what they may have been doing in their personal lives at the time, the
Yeah.
things they wrote were very idealistic, right? The dream they had for this country was very idealistic. The vision, that's Aquarius. So, we can be very hopeful that something exciting is going to come out of this. It's also not an accident that AI is sort of really rising up at this time too, because artificial intelligence, electronics and things are ruled by Uranus, which is the planet that rules Aquarius. We're probably going to see tremendous growth, as we already know, in AI. And that can be both productive and maybe not productive. But again, it's not an accident that it's happening now.
Amazing. Thank you for the education on the Aquarius. When you look at structures like AI, you have a deeper understanding as to why they're here. And what do you feel is a healthy way to approach new parts of our society that we never had before? Is it with trust and discernment, or how do you think about
I
that?
totally think we have to have trust and discernment, right?
Okay.
We can't just be naive and just free for all, whatever happens. We have to have foresight, and I think there are definitely possibly some scary elements with
Yeah.
AI, but I mean, I'm sure there's some positive things too.
That's an interesting field for me. And I have my older son is a writer. And so he, I think, loves just writing and the creation of ideas coming from him. So he's a little bit like,
Well,
that's not
exactly,
for me.
because AI can write, right? It can write a
Yeah.
lot of things. But again, the beauty of words in literature, poetry, great fiction, it conveys emotion, it conveys feeling, it conveys things that come from the heart and make
Yeah.
us think. I don't think AI can do that. We have to kind of hold on to that stuff or we lose some of the beauty of the human life experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You had something, if we can touch upon too, is more and more I feel like we're hearing the construct of time is man-made. It's not real. And so, I saw you had a blog post on breaking free from time and space. And why is that relevant? And how could that benefit someone to have a new framework or perspective on it?
First of all, in healing ourselves, whether that's spiritually, physically, etc., like we can do so much more in the quantum realm, so to speak. We can change ourselves. So, when I do my psychic protection workshop, when I send people home with these tools, I tell them to do it for 5 or 10 minutes a day.
Okay.
I'm like, I want you to do this every single day. It's much more important that you do it for 5 or 10 minutes than that you do it, every day than that you do it once a week for 45. Because as you see, when you're in a meditation space, so much happens in 5 or 10 minutes. It's no accident to me that Einstein, if you read his journals, he wrote about his brain exercises and he said it made him smarter. And after he started his brain exercises, he came up with all of his theories like relativity, etc. Before then, he was sort of just a medium kind of, physicist, not a genius one. So, but when I read him, he's just in a meditation space. He's in the same meditation space I put everybody in. So and again, if you're in a meditation space and if I'm doing something I love in this meditation space, like if I'm dreaming what I'm going to create or whatever, 5 minutes or 25 minutes can seem like 3, where you're like, oh, I wanted so much more of that, right? But yet, this is the funny part. When I've done some of my workshops and people are in a meditation and they're releasing painful parts, right? 20 minutes can seem like 3 hours. And what's really interesting to me is that, and so of course, if you're Einstein and you observe that, maybe you'd look a little bit farther into physics and go, what is time and space? It does have something relative to it, right? So again, time and space, we have gravity on this planet, so it does put us into a certain kind of constraint with time, but yet you can leave that in your emotional body or in your spiritual body, and that's when transformation really happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I like the way you said in the article, like the breaking free, because even in that meditative space, it seems like you were referring to it, I feel like earlier in the conversation, just about that breaking free and that freedom and liberation when we're able to allow ourselves to move out of the constraints that we felt a lot of our lives.
Right, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And we also, it's interesting in a meditation just how transformative it can be, in the sense that something that maybe you've been carrying for all of your life can just be released in that one moment. And then you are different afterwards.
I find that fascinating, that idea of being able to heal in an instant.
Yeah,
That's fascinating
yeah,
to me.
it is fascinating. Yeah, and freeing.
And freeing too. Janet, we've talked about a lot of topics today. Is there anything that people have a sense of the work that you do and how you do it, but what have I missed, or what would you add about, I guess, learning more about the life of your life and of a clairvoyant, or what's here for people maybe wanting to explore a little bit further?
Again, go to my website, check out my readings. I do so many different things. I do
Mhm.
readings, I do guided meditations with people over the phone. I teach some of the tools. I like to do it better teaching the tools in person in
Yeah.
my workshops, but I do it over the phone sometime. But that's a great place to start because so much will come out of that. I don't have a fix like it happens this way every single time because it's different with every single person and
Mhm.
what they're going through, right? But
Mhm.
you get so much more information from one reading that it's just like now you have a starting point for where you're going to go next.
Absolutely. And that's what I mean about your channeling information. You're getting information and it's so applicable. It's not just random kind of
Right.
information that you cannot use. You can use it in your life and it benefits. So,
Right, because I
yeah.
believe that we are here to be happy and thrive. There's a lot of
Mhm.
misconceptions in the spiritual world that we have to learn all these painful lessons, like I really think we're here to be happy and thrive
Yeah.
and let go of the pain.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. And have you seen that play out with your clients too, the letting go?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I
Yes.
know.
It's fun to work with people. It's especially fun to work with people over time where I really see the changes that they make.
Very,
Yeah.
very impactful. And I think that one of the foundations, or the one of the things I like to offer through the podcast is like, here there are many ways. And I believe that we used to think that there were only a few ways. And now it's this offering of, and if it speaks to you, if it's resonant to you, then check it out. Be curious, wonder why.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I love that. I will link your website and any social media and just where people can find you. But I've
Mhm.
greatly enjoyed this conversation and I thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was fun to talk to you.
Yeah. To the listeners, thanks for being here and we'll see you in the next episode. So thank you so much, Janet. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit maureenspielman.com or mysticalsisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.